thank you, Robert, for joining me. This is the Sunseeker podcast. It's spirituality and conscious expansion, mental health podcast. And I thought there would be, no better person to speak with about this than yourself, as in you wear a lot of hats, but you are a tattoo artist, a musician, you practicing tantric when it comes to, I believe, Shaivism, and you've been doing meditation for 10 plus years, lots of trips to India, and you've been really immersed in this work. And so I thought this would be a great conversation to have for our listeners and for my own spiritual journey. So thank you for joining. This is awesome.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Thanks so
Yes.
much.
Thank you. So I just want to I've heard this in a number of interviews before, but I just wanted to ask you what your life was like before and after you received the Juggernaut sticker on the beach of Asbury Park.
Oh yeah, it was actually Point Pleasant, but not too far. Yeah. That's where I grew up. I grew up about 15 minutes south of Asbury, small town called Point Pleasant. And as you mentioned, I had met a Hare Krishna devotee that was my first introduction to the Maha Mantra and the image of Jagannath, which is the unmanifested incarnation or deity of Vishnu or of Krishna. And it's it kind of that was the jump off point. But I feel like now that I look back, and I can zoom out a little bit, I'm 51 now. It was always there, that the inkling to search for a deeper meaning, or I daydreamed a lot as a kid and stuff, but I felt like I was always kind of exploring the more subtle realms of existence that we live in my own personal life. I think a lot of that had to do with me maybe growing up without brothers and sisters. I was an only child up until much later on in life when my mom adopted some kids. So, but in the, all my young years were spent, a lot of it were, I had a lot of friends and relatives, but I spent a lot of time on my own. And I think that the urge for self-discovery was always kind of there. That devotee that I met in Point Pleasant that summer when I was 16 years old, or maybe even 15 years old, definitely ignited the spark in that time. But there was already kindling there to catch fire,
Very cool. Yeah, I'm also an only child. So even when you're like mentioning that, I did find myself personally, just a lot of time, you have a lot of time to yourself. And so you kind of, I guess, begin to go into that internal journey because you are, with yourself for a lot of the time. Think I wanted to go back to, I guess, right before you became, or like really went into your spiritual practice. You were working for some bikers and
Mm-hmm.
kind of doing that whole deal. And were you tattooing at that point
Yeah. I just started. My first apprenticeship was with my business partners now, Mike Schweigert and Tom Yak. But we were all working for this guy named Gene, who's passed away, so I can discuss some of the topics that normally I wouldn't even have brought up or mentioned if he was still alive. There's a lot of illegal activity around us and stuff like that. But Gene was like a real cool guy, like he, for as much of a outcast and iconoclast that he was, and like, a criminal. He had like a cool kind of, he treated us really nicely, and he saw something in us that he didn't see in a lot of his other tattooers that work for him and guys in the club and stuff like that. Like, he saw that we were interested. Like Tom Yak, he's a Vaishnav, like he was practicing Hare Krishna at the time. I had my interest and then me and Mike were both playing music and stuff, and Gene thought that stuff was really cool. He was really interested in that. Not interested enough that he would like well, he actually even came to shows and stuff like that, but he wasn't like practicing or anything like that. But he saw that we were into some different stuff. I think he saw some trust in that, that we're like trying to like better ourselves in a lot of ways and not just like kind of like live this um, kind of toxic low level lifestyle that a lot of the guys in that time did. So being exposed to those, like kind of like renegade kind of outlaw stuff definitely set me up later when I started meeting like the sadhus and stuff like that in India, because those guys are on the outskirts of society completely. Even though they're recognized as religious people, they're still like they're living a completely different life than the householders there. Um, Many of them, have had some sort of realization where they're going deeper, and it makes it even harder to interact in the world. So me, like I've always met these people that are kind of like on the outskirts of society, like in the punk rock scene, the hardcore scene, skating, stuff like that, and then the bikers and things like that, which, like, the not being of the world is kind of the definition of Shiva. That's what makes Shiva who he is. The matted hair, naked, covered in ash, not being affected by good nor bad. All those things are aspects of Shiva, which is uh, in the end, the consciousness of infinite goodness. But as a deity or as an icon, Shiva stands outside of society, where like Vishnu is actually very elegant and bejeweled and decadent, and like treated like a king, like or Lord Ram or Lord Krishna. Lord Shiva is definitely more of a just like this outside of society, and then like you can see that like Rastafarianism developed from that tradition as well. So like the Rastas are a good example of this as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think I've heard you just speak really highly of your kind of like connection with Shiva, and and I think that just knowing some of your work and kind of like the work that you kind of do, it's almost like you are really have immersed your life within this kind of like lifestyle of, you do your work, you do your meditation, you do your music, and it's all kind of connected. And um it's almost like it maybe the deity can like express through you through doing some of that stuff, which is really cool. So do you think, when did you start to really feel that energy kind of start to come through you like within your work?
Well, when I was younger, when I first started tattooing, and when I started taking painting a lot more seriously, I used to compartmentalize all that stuff. There was like the painting, the tattooing, the music, the spirituality. They were all like different kind of aspects of my life until like maybe the last 15 years, I really started to integrate all of them and realize that they're all an offering. You know, so as you offer, you become, so the thing that what you're offering to and the offerings that you're making towards something, that will start to reflect in you. So then you start to see it in your work, and you start to see it in your behavior. You start to see it in, like, if you start like kind of doing this practice, you start to see things with a little bit more equanimity, and you start to like, give people more the benefit of the doubt, and the judgment comes down a little bit more. These are the things that we all struggle with every day. I'm not saying I'm above judgment, because I do it all the time, and that I see everything, equally, but it's something that I strive for, through the offerings to Lord Shiva, the meditations on Lord Shiva, the songs to Lord Shiva, the visualizations of, like all those things, and Devi as well. Uh, they start to, if you spend enough time in the rose garden, you'll start smelling like a rose. That's, I guess that's the goal.
Yeah, and I think I can definitely start to feel that in my life. Working with some of the deities and, my own practice, and just it's really changing the way that I'm moving through life, and kind of I've been more in tune with a lot of like the subtler magic that is, the beauty in life, whether it is just people or nature, or and I'm in Brooklyn in New York City, and thankfully I'm near a park, and I can really feel that energy. Whereas before I started to my own practice, which is not my practice, it is I belong to Thousand Sons Academy, and my spiritual teacher guru is Raja Chowdhury, and so through working under his kind of practice, raising Kundalini and some Kriya breath work, it's changed my life immensely. And so I think that now I'm starting to have that feeling of, experiencing life, whether it's like this podcast or I work in a sober house, like working with clients and all those things, all as a, experiencing the divine, like in all of those experiences as well. Um, yeah, I wanted to ask you about when I believe it was Dan Higgs showed you kind of like the Kali Ghat artists and paintings outside the Kali Temple in Calcutta, and it just if you could explain what that was like and how that kind of like intertwined and developed your style as it is today.
Yeah, yeah, my exposure to a lot of the early devotional paintings, many of them were by Westerners. One in particular, who I had the fortune of meeting and spending a lot of time when I first started going to the temple. Her name is Mother Jadharani. Um, she did a lot of the paintings for the early um, Krishna books, Prabhupada's books. One to speak of that many people that are listening to this will know is the Cro-Mag's Best Wishes album cover, the Nrsingadev. On that cover she painted. So her paintings are very dynamic. She's an excellent painter. I think she was inspired a lot by the painters of India at the time that were definitely more for like the calendars. Guys like Sharma, who is a popular one. Many people are B.G. Sharma are familiar with his work. These paintings are pretty. They're high end. They're very well done, oil or acrylic paintings. So I really love that artwork, but the way I learned to paint was through tattooing. Definitely has more of a folk art, self-taught approach to it. And within the limitations of tattooing, it makes you kind of design your images a little bit differently, a little bit more raw, a little bit more to the point, not a lot of detail, because you don't want to be doing tons of detail in the tattoo because most of it's going to not hold up over time. And you want it to be very clear and legible because it's on skin. So Dan Higgs, who's another great visionary artist and amazing tattooer at the time, who's now retired from tattooing, he showed me the painters of the Kali Ghat, which is the bazaar outside the Kali temple in Kolkata. And these paintings are done on the spot in the bazaar while people are watching, much like tattoos. They're not taking 80 hours, 100 hours like those other painters that I mentioned earlier who do these like really highly dynamic, beautiful paintings of deities. These are beautiful in their own way, that they're very simple and the forms are really clear. So that influenced me like, oh, this is like Americana tattoo flash. Just it's done in a similar kind of style and hand and look, and it has the same kind of impact to me as Tattoo Flash had. So when I got turned on to that, that's when I really started like painting deities nonstop. I had done a few before then, but like that gave me a focus and a direction and something to kind of pursue as an aesthetic inspiration.
Yeah, it's really really cool. I think the question that I had or that I was thinking about before this, just like on the tattoo front, is that like so if I look at like the Japanese style with like Horitomo and Tataki and to Chris Garver and those guys, so with the Japanese lineage, and then there's there's Peloponnesian, and then there's also some of like all these different, styles with like roots, and then I kind of look at your work, and it's almost like there is a real kind of like style that kind of comes, with your work. And so is there a number of people that are doing styles that are similar to your work? Like when you look through, do you see a lot of like people, being inspired and borrowing from, some of your work maybe that you're looking at?
Yeah, my main three influences in tattooing had always been Dan Higgs, Tom DeVita, and Ed Hardy.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people are also influenced by those three artists, especially people that tend to do more American traditional tattooing. Having the blessing to be around those guys, not Ed as much. I do know him and I'm friendly with him, but being around DeVita and Higgs a lot, spending a lot of time with those guys and having friendships with them definitely informed the way I do things. And it informed the look of my tattoos, and it's what I like about tattooing those two artists specifically. So I think there's a lot of people that are also influenced by them. Of course, now, I've been tattooing for 25, 26 years now. I think I'm on 26, going on 27 actually. And so there's a lot of my work out there. It's been published a lot. I've done a lot of tattoos. I've worked in a lot of busy shops with a lot of people. So yeah, of course, there's people that probably borrow from me as well. I try not to look at it that much. If sometimes I see it, sometimes it's flattering, sometimes it's frustrating because honestly, like the subject matter I'm dealing with, with like deities, iconography, esoteric mysticism, the tarot, things like that, all those things, much like Japanese tattooing, as you mentioned earlier, if it doesn't have the background, if it doesn't have the study and it doesn't have the dedication to what is being revealed in these images, a lot of the times it looks a little cheap. You can have a great tattoo with all the right bells and whistles, all the esoteric nomenclature, all the elements, but you can tell if it's someone that's like living the life or if it's just a look, you know. So I think to me the style of the tattooers that I mentioned were guys that were definitely living the life, and that's what always appealed to me, And same with like music and things like that. There's so many great punk bands that like there's better musicians playing punk, but they're not really punk, and then the great punks were the ones who played punk no matter how good they were at it with sincerity, and that usually shines through and makes for a better band and a much more gratifying musical experience, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think especially when you're talking about the subject matter of deities and kind of like the energy that you're working with, there really is like an energy that is it kind of comes with and is transferred through your work. I mean, I think I even feel that when I scroll through your Instagram page and like look through your work, it's like you can tell there is a lot of time and wisdom and energy that kind of goes in, because like when I it just you can feel the impact of just looking at any of your pieces, and it's like boom, like boom, and it just like I don't know. I definitely, before I started practicing, when I saw your work, I felt that, and even after, and I've come and gotten tattooed by you, and I've showed people some of your work, and they've been like, "Whoa, who is this guy?" Like, this is incredible. I, want to go get tattooed by this guy, and it's just something about you're being really knowing your craft. So in your journey of tattooing these deities, how many of the people who come to get tattooed by you have like an understanding of what they're getting when it comes to like an esoteric or a spiritual type of tattoo, and how many of them are just like the image, I guess?
I think it's different levels, I think I could give a percentage, like maybe 60% know what they're getting and have like some sort of history with it. The other 40% might just want like them aesthetically, or them But I feel like each person that does get it, they're drawn to it for a reason. And that's something I can't discredit or like that's not for me to know or figure out why someone is attracted to it, because there's so many levels. It can be like, personally, I believe, like past life, that they might have experienced these images or this thing in a different lifetime, or there's something happening subconsciously that draws them to it, even if they don't know what it is. And sometimes that could be the access point for someone starting a practice. Like someone could love a tattoo of, like, oh, I love this image of Buddha. I'm not a Buddhist, but then they get the Buddha tattoo, and then they're constantly seeing it and reminding them of it. So then they start like kind of like investigating, Buddhism. That's just one example, but like I think that everyone is having these kind of experiences, and where they wind up in my chair with me tattooing them, it's wherever they are in the path towards wherever they're going. They could be very advanced, could be a sadhaka or a yogi, or they can just be like someone who just beginning to like look into this stuff, or no, not looking into it at all and just kind of stumbled into it and are drawn to it for a reason, or their family was into it, or there's so many ways. But I do feel like there's a magnetic pull to these deities, and that's the one thing I was going to mention with like the sadhana practice relating to artwork, like watching. I've had the opportunity and the blessing to see deities installed, properly with what's called prana pratishta, which is like a very arduous like process of installing a deity. So it's basically like activated. Prana pratishta is like breathing life into the deity. That's how it kind of translate from Sanskrit. You're giving prana to the deity. So I try to do that in my tattoos, when it calls for it, that I can breathe that kind of whatever practice I'm doing at the time or have done to get to that point is going to live in that tattoo.
Wow. Yeah, that is really cool. Just having that energy, and I think that it's almost like some of the work you're doing. Like you have therapists and you have people in your life that are help you. I don't know, when it comes to different moments, kind of heal. And I think through tattooing, even like with what you're saying, a lot of that kind of work that you've done is really healing for people with wherever they're at, and kind of breathing that healing energy, and they leave the shop with something that has helped them. And I think that that's really really cool. um so I guess like this past year, I mean, I've seen you on your Instagram. You've been very busy. You've released a book. You've released a Tantra Esoterica deck, which I have here. I got my my deck, which is
Nice.
great. Yeah, and you've also done some shows, and I think I've seen some of your work in some galleries and such. And so, believe you did like 78 pieces in about a year, while you were also tattooing in a full time schedule and all this stuff. So, how has that been this past year? Just like with your balancing your practice, your life, your music. I think you just also released some new music as well. So it's just like you've done so much like in this past year. So what has that been like for you this year?
It's made me reevaluate the way I do things for sure. Like, I don't know if I could do another year the way I just did this last year, because with like all the great things that happened in that process, there was a lot of struggle, and it feels good to kind of rest and not be painting 6 to 7 paintings a week right now. Like I'm still painting as much as I can, but like the crush isn't there. Like there was a thing with the tarot that, for one, I was really inspired to paint it, and two, that I had tried to make them in the past and had like burned out and never finished. So I knew that I had to keep going and continue it, and knowing that the scope of the work that was involved and how much I was going to have to do, it just kept me like, like just shaving off a little bit each day. I'm getting closer and closer and closer, and there was a very clear goal that I had to complete the deck. Where I think goals are really important. And it sounds, set your goals, something you've been told since you were a kid, and it sounds kind of trite, but have something to move towards. That's definitely part of any dharmic approach. In any kind of Eastern spirituality, will have a goal in mind. That's part of the Dharma. The Dharma, the Artha, and the Kama, those three aspects of living, the result is moksha, which is liberation. So you have to have a goal, you have to have a means to attain the goal, and you have to do the work to move towards the goal in order to achieve liberation in the spiritual path. That's the kind of the very simple framework of a sadhak, someone who's practicing sadhana, But that being said, like I felt like it was out of my hands that whole time, and the record too. So the tarot deck and the record, when it was happening, I was just kind of like just trying to like hold that space as best I could so that stuff could come through and I could complete and move on to whatever's coming next.
Great. Yeah, and then the record is Burning is Learning, and so just to say that. And
The
so
band
I'm
Soma.
just, and Soma, yeah, the band Soma. And so I was curious about, like, when you were dealing with the deck in and of itself, was there any aspect of the deck that you were drawn to, like, I guess the Hermit or the Magician, or is it just like when you're doing these paintings, is there any like deities that you enjoy doing more than others? And that I think that I've spoken to you before, and you said you've spent like 10 hours on like a painting, like straight, so like you've really delved deep. Is there any that it feels like time is just thinner than others, or is it all
Yeah.
just depending on the day? And
Yeah, there were two that really like I really had a strong connection with the entire time. That was the Fool, because that was the first one I painted, because I did it in order. He's the first card, he's the zero, or he's the zero card. He's the beginning, because he can be absorbed into any aspect of the deck, because it's it's his journey. He's the hero. He's the one walking off the cliff into the tarot. And the Tower card really was one that like resonated a lot with me. And that's halfway through the major arcana. So that's like when it's kind of the yin to the Fool's Yan. So, and I feel like at that point in the journey of the royal road that the Fool is traveling on, that part of the journey is where things start to get like pretty hectic, and because like with the Tower, you need to like you're building something in your life, and you need to just destroy it for it to be reborn better than it was the first time. And that's kind of what I was going through with the Tarot, because I had failed making it a couple times. It was this kind of like big kind of artistic undertaking, that I had to like kind of change my way of doing things, and I had to change like my way of living from that point on. And I made some pretty big changes in my life while doing that Tarot, and it felt like that. Like I felt like I was getting jettisoned out of a huge building down to the ground, and like a very humbling experience. So there's a lot of humility in both of those cards, and yeah, I think it's because with the Fool, it's the potential for anything, and then with the Tower, it's everything that's happening to you. So yeah, it's the sum total of all the things that you've done in your life, what you've built your life. Your idea of your life in your mind needs to be completely destroyed And that's 100% the Shakti of the tantric teachings too. Chamundaye, the Devi who destroys all thought.
Hmm. So if you feel comfortable just speaking about some of the adjustments that you had to make, I guess, like within your life to, you know.
Yeah. I was like, kind of just not being attentive to a lot of things in my life, my health, my sleep, my relationship with my wife. Um, I was just like kind of all over the place, and I was like definitely like level of weird kind of autopilot, just kind of going through the motions, and still, I was still practicing. I was still doing sadhana. I was still chanting mantras, doing kirtan and things like that. But the core of the teaching had been lost, you know, without saying too much about where I was at. But like, I had also come home from like a very intense pilgrimage with my guru first, and then in India with the guys in Soma. And when I got back from that, I kind of like had bottomed out, and I realized like I hadn't really integrated in the best way that I had learned for years how to integrate properly, back into the world from being in these places and going so far out, having to like kind of like make a soft landing. I just crashed, so that had happened, and I felt like that was the tower in my life for sure.
Got it. Got it. So for me, I guess, I'm very early on in my practice and all these things, like maybe just, might be like 6, 7 months, into like just like since I first did like a yoga class, like along this kind of like journey. And then maybe in November is when I started, 2023, really getting on this whole thing. And then through my teachers and mentors, I was doing a lot of meditation and like on the heart center and dealing with like Lakshmi. And then that's how this podcast kind of came about. And just like it's Sunseeker and, the academy that I belong to is a Thousand Suns Academy. And so I guess what advice do you have for, creatives or people that are creating and have a spiritual practice, how to balance those aspects of their lives out and really, yeah, do the best that they can with what they have in the moment.
Slow and steady for sure. Like we're all young on the path. People that have been practicing for 20 years are still young. I've met people that were practicing for 40, 50 years, and they still consider themselves young on the path. It's not measured in hours, days, months, or years. It's measured in lifetimes, and it's beyond measurement, really, because what we're talking about is how we relate to the infinite consciousness, and our relation to that infinite consciousness is infinite. So, uh, a couple years here and there, a couple months here and there are grains of sand on the beach, compared to, the entire universe, which is where we're living and what we're made up of and what we're acting in. So I think it's really important just to take small steps. Don't be hard on yourself about it. The spiritual practice, like the point you're in right now, is really, it's a sweet spot, because it's all kind of new to you, and you're seeing parts of like you're recognizing parts of yourself that you might not have recognized before, and it's
Mhm.
amazing. It's like a rebirth, it really is
Yep.
like there's a cleanse happening, you're kind of shaking whatever the dust had accumulated thus far in your life. It's being shook off, and you're starting to see through a clear lens. It can get really dry after that, because
Mm.
that's when when you start taking it seriously, and you struggle with it. If you're learning new things, it's like learning a new language. A lot of the times, quite not, in a lot of practices, you are learning a new language. So you're struggling with pronunciation. You're struggling with your focus and you're struggling with the motivation and inspiration, things like that, and your mind and your ego is going to do everything to talk you out of
Mm,
practicing, because what you're doing is challenging your mind, you're challenging your false self to get to the core of your true self. So there's a lot, you have to be real careful not to burn out, not to be too hard on yourself, not to compare yourself with others, because someone who might seem like they're really far down the path might not be far at all. And people that might seem like they're new or not advancing might be making huge advances, or maybe have hugely advanced before you even conceptualize where they're at. So
mm.
yeah, I think it's just important just to like believe in yourself, believe in what you're doing, and just small, um, very aware steps as we go. Like be aware of like where you're at. Look back at your life from 3 months ago, then 6 months ago, and a year ago, and see how much it's changed since you have started practicing, and how you're, like you mentioned earlier, like creative people. Notice like how much more creative you've become because you've been open to this channel that you yourself have opened within inside you through these practices.
Yeah, that's thanks for that advice, because that's definitely great advice. I think that learning to not be hard on myself, or yeah, that whole deal is something that I'm learning, and to just be in the moment and living from the present moment is, it's challenging. Spirituality is challenging. That's something that I think a lot of people aren't quite, so tuned to, that it's not the easiest thing, but it definitely has been opened me up to really life in the world that I've never really seen it before. It's like you were saying, just took the dust like out of my eyes, and I was like, oh, now I have like new eyes, so I can see
Yeah.
a little bit of the magic that is like the world. Um, I wanted to just talk about Soma and this latest project, Bernie is Learning, and so how has that been? I guess with everything, guys
I
have been
mean,
playing shows and all that. Yeah,
yeah, the band now is like, we had started this band right before pandemic, and we played one show, and then the pandemic happened, and then we didn't play for almost 2 years, and we started playing again. And it's been growing exponentially since we restarted and started getting into a regular kind of show schedule. And like, man, it's been so cool watching it grow, because it's like we're playing to all these different audiences. We're playing in like temples, we're playing in yoga studios, that we're playing in bars, we're playing like big concert venues too. So it's like we're reaching like different people in a cool way. Like we're not trying to proselytize and like convert anybody to anything, but we're trying to share something with every show we do. And it's cool seeing it come to fruit, seeing it blossom. And then this last record we did, we just had like a really amazing experience making it with Phil, which is how we met Phil Cavano. He's friends with your dad and yourself. He was he had a huge impact on how the record came out, and helping us find the sound that we knew we were looking for, but didn't really know how to articulate. So that's been great. And then we're going on tour with Grails in June and July, which is a band that I was always like very, since the first time I heard them, I really liked them. The few times I've seen them play, I've really enjoyed them. So to have the opportunity to play with them a bunch of shows and like see how their audience receives us is going to be really cool.
that's cool. That's yeah, I've listened to, you know a lot of your music, and it's definitely, something that I listen to, whether I'm, walking to the train, or listen to even when I was, running in the park. So it's kind of, you have a lot of different songs that I feel like I've utilized, or like maybe even before I'm reading, I listen to some of your music, then I get into reading some spiritual text. So it's been a good part for me. And like you're mentioning, shout out to Phil Caivano. Yeah, my dad has met him, and through Monster Magnet, he's also been a guy who has been very helpful along my journey as well, of just keeping, things real and present, which is cool. Just all of these different areas of life, being part of the whole spiritual journey. So I just wanted to, yeah, thank you for your energy and your presence, and definitely your tattoos helped my life, and your music and all these things. And so people can, if you could just let the audience know where they can find you, when it comes to social media and all those things.
Social media, the best is probably my Instagram. It's Robert Ryan 323. I work at Electric Tattoo. They have an Instagram. It's Electric Tattoo NJ. So those are two ways to reach me through social media. I'm at the shop in Asbury Park, so anybody on the East Coast, come visit. I take walk-ins on Saturdays. So if you want to come get a tattoo, you can make an appointment over the phone, or you can just show up on a Saturday that I'm there and get a tattoo. Soma is going to be playing this summer, June through July. There's also the Soma Kirtan Instagram as well, which you can find, and all the dates that we're playing. We're doing Baltimore to Canada, with Grails. And
Awesome.
then you
That is
also, while I'm plugging myself, um, you can get the tarot deck from Raking Light Projects, and they also
yeah.
have the book that I made before that called Deity, which has paintings of a lot of the deities that we're talking about, and the style of painting that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, there's a bunch of ways to access stuff if you're interested, and I think as crazy as social media can be, it's made it accessible for a lot of people and easy to communicate with people in that way.
So cool, so cool. Thank you, Rob, and hopefully we can do a follow up at some point. This I've been really looking forward to this one, and it was just great to connect and to
Yeah,
talk
thank you
with
so
you.
much. Next time, hopefully we can do it in person. We'll do it in the temple, and we'll do
For
some
sure.
sadhana together. Awesome.
Oh, that'd be sweet. That'd be sweet. All
Yeah.
right, Rob. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Christian.
I
I appreciate
appreciate
it.
you, man. Thank you.